Putin postures. Poland and Paris pressure. But peace proves perpetually postponed. Yep, it was another major win for Team Nothing Ever Happens in the greater East versus West political game. But the seemingly static nature of the world obfuscates the intriguing strategies that each of the key parties has pursued. Indeed, we have 4 major groups involved in the conflict in question: Ukraine, Russia, the United States, and Europe. Let's check in on each one of them. Well, Ukraine is a good place to start because its situation is the most straightforward. A few months ago, there was a notable switch in Kyiv's position, moving away from a practical expectation of expelling Russia from Ukraine and toward a ceasefire being the best option. It reflects how Russia has held the initiative within Ukrainian territory for the last year and a half, even if Team Nothing Ever Happens can still claim a victory here, because the territorial exchange in the grand scheme of things is relatively small. Put differently, Ukraine's new disposition reflects the reality on the ground, especially when considering that any hope for further aid from the United States seems preconditioned on coming to terms with that. Meanwhile, Russia has stalled ceasefire negotiations seemingly every way that it could, while simultaneously trying to appear like the Kremlin wants to find a way to end the war. The most recent iteration of this strategy came with inviting Ukraine to join Kremlin officials in Turkey to have direct talks for the first time since the invasion's first stage. Well, Ukraine thought that this would be such a good idea that we might as well have Zelensky and Putin meet to do it for real, something that last happened so long ago that I keep having to use a video featuring a now twice outdated German chancellor. Meanwhile, Europe and the United States were ready to go with this, because an informal meeting of NATO foreign ministers was scheduled in Turkey that same week anyway. Consequently, Ukraine was attempting a diplomatic gambit to get Putin to reveal that Russia was not actually serious about its intent to reach a ceasefire. And it worked. Putin responded that this runs against normal diplomatic protocol, as such high-level meetings generally do not come until low-level officials have ironed out some of the more bureaucratic and logistical details. Now, his statement is accurate. Generally speaking, heads of states only have so many hours in a day. They cannot manage every national policy, so they have to do a bit of triage. They only show up when a situation is important enough to warrant it. But it simultaneously revealed the exact information that Ukraine was trying to elicit. Zelensky thinks the situation is serious enough to warrant his presence in Turkey, but Putin does not. Whether that does anything to move the Trump administration's opinion, assuming that it matters at all, remains to be seen. Speaking of which, then there is the United States. Oh dear. Trump was asked about the entire situation and said that he was not disappointed that Russia sent a low-power delegation. He claimed that the United States just took in $4 trillion in pledged investment during his Middle East trip. So why should anyone be disappointed about a delegation? He knows nothing about a delegation, and he has not even checked. Yeah. Don't listen to what leaders say. But I actually believe that he has not checked. That is doing, or not doing, and it is telling. To be blunt, the Trump administration does not care much about what is happening with the war. Insofar as Trump can claim he mediated a deal, he is happy to continue being a part of the process. But he has not shown any willingness to take costly measures to properly coerce either party to reach a deal. And no, simply cutting military aid to Ukraine does not count. That just moves the expected outcome of the war, but has no direct effect on resolving the bargaining friction that is causing the war to continue, whatever that may be. What he cares about is investment in the United States. That is all well and good, but you cannot expect that to get you anywhere with the war. Finally, Europe. On the surface, it seems that Europe is putting in more effort. The most recent diplomatic arc began last weekend, with a major summit in Kyiv, with leaders from Poland, the United Kingdom, France, and Germany joining Zelensky. They laid down an ultimatum. Russia commits to an unconditional 30-day ceasefire along all fronts of the war, or Europe will pass a new sanctions package to punish Russia. Okay, that is all well and good. Conditional punishments can help override bargaining frictions by making war costlier to pursue, and thus make the affected target more willing to compromise. But we find ourselves back to here. Will Europe eventually pass something to that effect? Probably, but the pathway to punishment always seems to be slow-moving. It turns out that if you really want to impose punishments on Russia, you can, just do it, and then pull them back later in response to Russia de-escalating. They say it will be Tuesday. We will see. Even if that holds, Europe is still unnecessarily passing the initiative to Russia. Likewise, rather than discuss how you think spending 5% of GDP on defense is a good idea, you could, start spending 5% of GDP on defense. In other words, you can be proactive with these steps, not reactive. And one might argue that a truly committed actor that wanted to demonstrate its resolve on the issue would indeed be proactive. And observers in the Kremlin monitoring the situation would interpret the lack of initiative as a signal of Europe's middling commitment to the situation. Therefore, they see no need to recommend changes to Russia's war strategy. Obviously, Europe's rhetoric toward Ukraine is much more productive for the Western cause than Washington's as of late. But the actions are what really matter. If Europe really wants to separate itself, then it cannot just be that it is making threats to impose sanctions. It also cannot just be that it is relaxing debt rules to finance defense spending. It must be imposing realized sanctions and donating realized weapons that fundamentally change the war's bargaining dynamics. Look, there is going to be a lot of overanalyzing the political chess pieces that moved over the last 7 days. But practically speaking, what you really need to know is this. The absence of negotiations is a type of negotiations in its own special way. And the United States does not think that the conversation matters enough to leave its Secretary of State behind, even as the summit takes place where he currently is. That appeared to be a wise choice, as the Russia-Ukraine talks did not last long, and Ukraine claims that the Russian delegation was not there to do anything relevant, though that claim comes with the caveat that this remains a messaging war directed at the Trump administration. Then again, Russia was still demanding that Ukraine withdraw from the oblasts that Russian Federation law recognizes as under Moscow's custody, since the signing ceremony seen here, despite how Russia would take more than 3 years to capture it all, given an optimistic interpretation of the current pace of gains. All it seems they actually agreed to is a prisoner exchange. And that could have been a phone call. Another victory for Team Nothing Ever Happens indeed. Meanwhile, if you have questions about what went on, post them below, and I will answer a few of them over on Lines on Maps Extra soon. And if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.